Welcome to Serious Rock Talk Crime.
Welcome to another episode of Serious Rock Talk Crime, where we look at dark incidents, unsolved mysteries scattered across the years, all related to rock music and musicians. Some you may know, others may surprise you. Today we look at the short life and bizarre death of a man who, in his brief career, cast a long shadow, Bobby Fuller. The following borrows content from an article on Fuller by Chris Champion in The Guardian, who in turn features information from the book by author Miriam Linna. Her book is titled I Fought the Law, The Life and Strange Death of Bobby Fuller. The book is co-written by Bobby's brother, Randy Fuller, who played bass guitar in his band. Guardian reporter Champion asks, imagine that the British invasion of the US never happened, that the Beatles' three-night stand on the Ed Sullivan Show never aired, and that American popular music in the 1960s developed on its own without the introduction of a viral strain from across the Atlantic. What might it have sounded like? Now, what if questions can be a waste of time, but in this case, I think there's some meat on the bone. What if there was no Beatles? I can barely hold the thought in my head without wanting to run out of the room. So let's continue with Mr. Champion. He asks, maybe the question lies in the music of Bobby Fuller, self-styled rock and roll king of the Southwest, who died July 18, 1966, age 23, in mysterious circumstances. Throughout the early 60s, working variously as a songwriter, performer, producer, label owner, and impresario, Fuller carved out a unique sound, blending Southern styles, drawing heavily on the stripped-down, raw, heart-and-sleeve rock and roll of Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and Eddie Cochran. To those elements he added vocal harmonies styled on the Everly Brothers and searing blasts of surf guitar and garage rock fuzz bass. It was a purely American music, one that didn't acknowledge the Beatles or other British bands then making an impact in America. Okay, a while back I interviewed Professor Richard Aquila, author of Let's Rock, How 1950s America Created Elvis and the Rock and Roll Craze. You can find that interview on our Serious Rock Talk website. Now, although Richard and I never conjured a Beatles-free world, you'll get a pretty strong vibe of what American rock was like pre-1964. In fact, author Miriam Linna writes, contrary to popular belief, American music was alive and well before the British invasion. Well, certainly it was, and she makes a compelling case for a reevaluation of Fuller as a pivotal figure in American pop music. My brother was ahead of his time, says Randy Fuller. I think in some ways he really was, and perhaps he paid the price, as often suffered by those far ahead down the trail. Randy recalls that his brother liked to say that the Beatles would, quote, never be able to do Buddy Holly, like Buddy Holly, because they're not from Texas, unquote. In other words, they didn't have the cadence or the swing, unable to tap into a rich vein of regional music that included Southern blues and R&B. They couldn't rock and roll like boys from the South. That propulsive rhythm is what drives I Fought the Law, a top 10 hit in March 1966 for the Bobby Fuller Four, who performed it on TV shows such as Hullabaloo and Chivalry, and jailhouse sets are backed by hot-stepping cowgirl go-go dancers brandishing six-shooters. With their distinctive J. Sebring haircuts, beetle boots, and tailored suits, the Bobby Fuller Four looked curiously out of step with their shaggier and more outre peers on the Los Angeles movie scene. He was born October 22nd, 1942 in Gooseneck, Texas. His parents, Lawson and Lorraine Fuller, had a younger son named Randy, and Lorraine's son from her previous marriage, Jack LaFleur. And I'll get back to half-brother Jack in a second. During his childhood, Bobby Fuller learned to play the drums, piano, and trumpet, while his brother Randy learned the guitar and trombone. When Bobby was 14, his father was offered a job with the El Paso Natural Gas Company. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the family moved to El Paso. After graduating from high school, Fuller enrolled in college. Randy was sent to military school in an attempt to steer him away from the path taken by half-brother Jack, who had some kind of criminal history. Okay, folks, the events surrounding the death of Bobby Fuller are so strange and in a way unsolvable that we must hold and guard all aspects of that which seem out of the ordinary. So when we hear that his half-brother Jack had a criminal history, we should take note, although I would never knowingly throw you a red herring, would I? And if we walk further down that path, we learn that Jack LaFleur was murdered. His body was found February 22nd, 1961. It's worth taking a look at the odd life of Jack LaFleur. If you ever need some material for a film noir, it's here. Jack entered the U.S. Navy, where he served honorably for 2 years during World War II. He was a stylish dresser. He was 6'4". He weighed 220 pounds. He married Peggy Jean Gifford at the age of 21, and they had one child. 6 months after their marriage, Jack and Peggy Jean separated and later divorced in New Mexico in 1955 when Jack was 25 years old. In 1961, at the age of 31, Jack was working as a licensed barber in El Paso when he befriended Roy Leon Handy, an itinerant restaurant cook, at the downtown Greyhound bus station. Handy was returning to Texas from a failed marriage in California. On February the 4th, 1961, LaFleur and Handy made a trip across the border to Juarez, where they purchased a map claiming to show the location of buried gold. You know, you just sense this is not going to turn out well. Okay, in LaFleur's car, a 1957 black and white Chev, they drove north from El Paso toward New Mexico. After stopping briefly in Alamogordo, New Mexico, where Jack's 10-year-old son and ex-wife Peggy lived, they continued toward Ruidoso, New Mexico, presumably in search of a gold location. In the afternoon of the next day, February the 5th, 1961, at a place called Pigeon Tank on US 70 near Mescalero, New Mexico, the pair made a stop where Handy shot LaFleur 3 times at close range in the back arm, the back of the head, with a .22 caliber handgun, killing him and then robbing him. LaFleur's stepfather reported LaFleur missing from El Paso on February the 8th. Now, after the shooting, Handy fled in LaFleur's car, disposing of the murder weapon on the roadside, and he was later apprehended in Lubbock on February 21, 1961 for cashing forged checks while using LaFleur's identity. Handy immediately confessed to police that he had killed LaFleur, claiming it was an accident. Handy was charged with first-degree murder and tried in New Mexico. During the trial, to avoid a death penalty, Handy abruptly changed his plea from innocent to guilty and consequently received a life sentence. Due to procedural errors that occurred during the investigation and trial, his sentence was later commuted to 10 years for manslaughter. Handy was also investigated for other murders that occurred in other parts of the country. Now, folks, this is the strange world in which Bobby Fuller lives. You don't read this in biographies of the Beatles or Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin, Paul Revere and the Raiders, or Bob Dylan, whatever. It's important to keep that in mind as we progress with this strange tale. I mean, there's a kind of a gothic ambience that rolls just like a fog off a swamp through the whole thing. You'll see what I mean. The death of his half-brother, Jack, hit Bobby pretty hard. However, it may have led him to pursue his musical career with greater intensity. He was attracting attention around El Paso as a drummer and worked diligently on his songwriting. Fuller decided he wanted to start recording music, and with his family's financial support, he was able to start his own record label, Exeter Records. In addition, he started a local club for all ages to hang out called Bobby Fuller's Teen Rendezvous. I spoke earlier about the difference between the Beatles and Buddy Holly. A big difference that I didn't mention is the role of entrepreneurship. Buddy Holly was an amazing entrepreneur. I won't take a detour into the facts of his life right now, but check it out, and to think he was only 22 when he passed away. Put it another way, can you imagine the Beatles starting their own label in 1963? Okay, and Bobby Fuller, also from Texas, had that amazing entrepreneurial spirit. Now, with Randy in military school, Bobby taught himself to play the guitar in order to increase his musicality. When his brother Randy came back, he was impressed with Bobby's work. Now, with Randy back, the brothers were able to record 2 tracks, which aired on local radio on Thanksgiving 1961. In 1963, Fuller opened his own teen club in El Paso called The Rendezvous. His group, then known as the Fanatics, were the house band. It was a sight to behold, says Randy, playing surf music in El Paso at our own teen club. In 1964, Exeter Records recorded 3 singles, including I Fought the Law, first recorded by the Crickets, the late Buddy Holly's band, and written by Cricket Sonny Curtis. Although the Crickets' own version was not a hit and was rarely, if ever, played in public, the cover by Bobby Fuller and his band established Fuller as a regional star and really his reputation. Bobby was never satisfied, and on one of his tours to California to promote his music, he met Bob Keane of Delphi Records. Keane was famous for discovering Ritchie Valens in the late 1950s. Valens, whose real name was Richard Stephen Valazula, died in the same plane crash as Buddy Holly. My friends, everything in life eventually connects. Okay, Fuller made an impression on Bob Keane at the time, but Keane did not feel the group was ready for the big time. Bobby became a local sensation. The El Paso Herald-Post stated in September 1964, England has the Beatles, but El Paso has Bobby. Yeah, Randy said the group experienced Beatles-style teen adulation at a local level. An appearance at a local shopping center drew 6,000 screaming and cheering boys and girls. Paper said it was like something was about to happen and you knew it. Now in '64, the Teen Rendezvous in El Paso burned down. So let's think about this. A nightclub opened by Bobby Fuller, financed by his family, burns to the ground. It may not seem suspicious on the face of it, so to speak, but as we go through the short, brief life of Bobby Fuller, let's make an attempt to somewhat aggregate the more jarring facts. Any insurance investigator will tell you that whenever a nightclub burns to the ground, it's suspicious. Again, a red herring? Who knows? The band decided to move to Los Angeles in November. The Bobby Fuller Four, as the band was now called, consisted of Jim Reese as rhythm guitarist, Dwayne Curico on drums, Randy Fuller playing bass, and Bobby as lead singer and guitarist. This time, Bob Keane signed the group, and they were soon playing in clubs around Southern California. Rapidly, the band became known by young people who frequented the clubs and by music scouts. The Bobby Fuller Four began recording tracks which established them as more than a regional success. Their first hit was Let Her Dance in '65. Then they recorded I Fought the Law in '65 for Mustang Records, which was a Delphi label, and the song hit Billboard Top 10 music charts soon after its release. In 1966, the band released the album I Fought the Law. Bobby's third and fourth singles, Nervous Breakdown and Not Fade Away, were recorded in his home studio. Additional songs were recorded and released, including Saturday Night, but none swept the airwaves like I Fought the Law. The band was even in a movie in 1966 called Ghost in the Invisible Bikini. The band's success led Keane to book 6 weeks of concerts. Not everything went smoothly, however. To quote Randy Fuller, it was a roller coaster ride. One minute we'd be playing a really great show where everyone loved us and loved our music, and the next show would be a total disaster. Despite the recognition and popularity being achieved by the group, the tour set up by Bob Keane was not the most pleasant. According to road manager Rick Stone, Bobby had thoughts of breaking up the band to launch a solo career. Okay, keep that in mind and add it to the growing stack of what I will call uncomfortable events. Keen's attempts to mold Fuller into a Ritchie Valens-style star perhaps alienated the rest of the band, and maybe Fuller himself became dissatisfied with the direction in which Keen was pushing the group. Keen came up with a lot of cheap gimmicks, too, to promote the group, and that didn't sit well at all with Fuller. After the tour, the band flew back to Los Angeles, and on July the 10th, 1966, the Bobby Fuller Four played what would be their last show together at a gig at Casey Kasem's Teen Dance Show. Okay, let the funeral shroud slowly descend. On the afternoon of July 18th, 1966, Fuller was found dead by his mother in her car, an Oldsmobile. Initial reports pointed to suicide. This is from the LA Times. Musician Robert Fuller, 23, was found dead on the parking lot at his Hollywood apartment house with a plastic hose in his hands leading to a gasoline can, unquote. At first it was thought Bobby died after drinking gasoline, but the autopsy revealed no gasoline in his stomach. His death was then attributed to inhaling gasoline fumes. That's how the police saw it, closing the case without even checking for fingerprints or conducting interviews. Now, the details told a different story. The car had not been in the lot for even 30 minutes before his mother found it, yet Fuller's body was in an advanced state of rigor mortis, suggesting he had died elsewhere. It's just so outrageous, inhaling gas fumes from a hose and the body has rigor mortis less than 1 hour after death. More recently, the cause of Bobby's death was officially changed from suicide to an accident. The death scene itself was strange. There was blood on Bobby's face and chest and on the car seat. It appeared as if he had been beaten up. His body and clothes were soaked with gasoline. On the floorboard, there was a partly full gas can with a rubber hose attached to the spout. Various theories have been advanced about Fuller's death. Mostly they're wildly implausible. An accident following a bad reaction to LSD, retribution for a dalliance with the girlfriend of a mob-connected Los Angeles nightclub owner, a mystery woman named Melody. One theory even implicated Keen, his manager, noting that Fuller was the third artist under his charge, after Valens and Sam Cooke, to die in disputed circumstances. Well, that's absurd. Buddy Holly died in a plane that crashed in bad weather, and Sam Cooke was shot by the manager of a hotel because she feared for her safety. Although, with Sam's death, there are many unanswered questions. Now, while Miriam Lena's book doesn't solve the mystery, it does offer up the name of someone whose entry into Fuller's life was a bad omen. Morris Levy, owner of Roulette Records. He was a notorious figure. He was once described as the godfather of the American music business. Levy's business partners and associates read like a roll call of the East Coast Mafia, and they include the members of the Gambino and Genovese families. By the way, Levy was convicted of extortion in 1990 on charges from an FBI investigation of alleged infiltration of organized crime into the record business. Now, shortly before Fuller's death, Bob Keen's label had signed an exclusive distribution deal with Roulette, and the Bobby Fuller Four's last single, The Magic Touch, a Motown-style soul number, was penned by a songwriter associated with Roulette. Okay, the situation is getting mobbed up. Randy Fuller believes it is likely his brother's death was connected to a business deal he wanted to back out of. He recalled seeing his brother and Keen in the company of a third man during the Bobby Fuller Four's spring 1966 stay in New York, although he could not remember who it was. But when shown a photo of Levy, Randy identified him without even knowing his name. Randy believes that if Bobby had lived, he might have returned to El Paso, opened a new teen club, and continued his experiments in the studio, free from the interference of commercial pressures. Author Miriam Lena is convinced Fuller was destined for more than cult success, pointing to the fact that a UK tour had been booked for the Bobby Fuller Four. She writes, "If that had happened, I honestly believe today's music scene would be vastly different. Fuller would have represented the second coming of Buddy Holly, who 8 years earlier had toured Britain, inspiring everyone from the fledgling Beatles to those guys who ended up being in a band called the Rolling Stones." Well, I don't support that view, but to borrow a line from Hemingway, Isn't it pretty to think so? My own conclusion? I think it's quite obvious that he didn't commit suicide by inhaling gas fumes from a hose. His death seems to be mob-related. Exactly what he did to incur the wrath of the mob is unknown. Was it a contract he was trying to back out of? Did it involve a femme fatale? Why was the cause of death changed from suicide to an accident? I mean, how do you accidentally inhale gas from fumes from a hose attached to a gas can while you're in an Oldsmobile? Plus, there's no record he suffered from mental illness. Whoever staged the so-called suicide scene wasn't very good at it, or maybe they were in a rush. Look, in the early days of rock and roll, a lot of strange, crazy things happened. It really was a Wild West. Folks, what's your theory? Why not let me know? Send me an email. I hope to bring you some more of these dark tales in this podcast, so stick around. I'm Dr. Ian Clarke, and you have been listening to Serious Rock Talk Crime. Be sure to visit our website, seriousrocktalk.com, and I'll be speaking with you soon. As always, the beat goes on.